Alrighty, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Every Calorie Counts podcast. Um, Tim has pneumonia,
Ammonia.
ammonia. Today we're gonna talk about pre-workouts. Let's dive in, Tim. I don't know where we're going with this, but
So I think yeah, we're gonna call it the pre-workout episode, I guess. Just to talk about pre-workout and setting ourselves up to be able to have the best workout possible. And I think I was telling Marina, I do want to touch on pre-workout supplementation specifically, right? Pre-workouts as a whole, maybe even get into some individual ingredients that you should be looking for, how to find the best pre-workout, et cetera, et cetera. But I think I really want to start it off with that concept I should say with that with the concept of I know I have probably created with our clientele a little bit of a um bias against pre-workout, right? A bias against caffeine, a bias against pre-workout. And I think it's gone too far, right? To where people aren't really recognizing right? The benefits of caffeine, especially pre-workout. But I think that we need to kind of unpack that whole concept first. Like caffeine, when, where, why, how, like what is the deal with caffeine, right? Because again, we do have a lot of rules and regulations with it, right? Like I should say a lot of rules and regulations, but we are very stern on the reality of like, hey, you shouldn't be having caffeine after 3 p.m. You shouldn't be having caffeine close to bedtime, that's for sure, right? You shouldn't be having caffeine if you are whatever, an overnight shift worker and you're working different shifts. Like you shouldn't be having caffeine in those scenarios, even though everybody does in that world. Again, maybe a different topic for a different day. But again, I think we are so adamant against caffeine in certain scenarios, right? That we fall on the side of, again, being biased against caffeine when I don't think that should be the case here at all, right? Like
Mhm.
caffeine is great. I've also said on different podcasts, maybe our podcast, maybe Instagram lives, whatever, where I would put caffeine up there. I know everybody loves creatine monohydrate, right? And when you talk about, over the counter supplementation, people say, oh, creatine's the best muscle building supplement in the world. It has the most clinical data, blah, 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 research, 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 right? I would honestly say, if it were up to me and it were my money, I would take caffeine over creatine 10 times out of 10. Not even a question in
And
my
it's not,
mind.
yeah, it's not even it's not even a,
Yeah, to positively affect my athletic performance and give me a better overall training session, which ultimately is going to lead to more muscle growth over time, right?
Mhm.
I don't see any logical way out of that for me and from my perspective. Again, I don't feel shit when I take creatine. I don't feel fucking anything. Somebody can,
Mhm.
I know people all the time, and I don't want to rant now on creatine, but people tell me all the time, like, oh, I put on 5 pounds when I take creatine. Shut the fuck up. No, you know. Oh, I notice the strength. No, you don't. You don't. You don't. You don't. Because if you did, you'd be taking creatine year round. You know what I mean? If it had that much of a dramatic impact on the way you look, feel, and operate. We know creatine does good things? Yes. But again, I can feel caffeine working, and that kind of brings us to the concept here of kind of going through pre-workout. And we can kind of touch on that as a whole here. I want to turn off my WhatsApp messages so that it doesn't get recorded over and over and over again going. Um, Sorry. So, touching on pre-workout as a whole, like we could touch on food pre-workout, we could touch on any type of like pre-workout rituals you might have, anything that we want to touch on as far as pre-workout is concerned. But I think opening it up, pre-workout supplements, getting to it. I think the biggest issue that I have with pre-workout supplements is that there is an outrageous amount of stimulant in most pre-workouts. All right. Now, that is a reality. And again, I know I just spent this entire kind of intro trying to kind of debunk the idea that we have this bias against caffeine. But there's always a point of diminishing return with everything we do, right?
Yep.
Like taking something just to feel overstimulated, probably not going to be productive for your training session at all. It's probably
Mhm.
not going to help as far as muscle development is concerned. You might go in there thinking that you're doing better, but if we were to put you in a more calm, controlled state with the same level of energy, you'd probably be able to lift a little bit more effectively, take deep sets much deeper, right? Control your breathing a little bit more
Mhm.
effectively, right? So the problem that I have with pre-workouts right now is that they are so stimulated
Yep.
that taking a full dosage of these pre-workouts is nowhere near a necessity. And if you feel like it is a necessity, you've probably gone so far past what you need as far as caffeine is concerned that you either need to take an entire break, right? And then restart at a much more feasible dosage and keep it there, right? Or bring it down to that feasible dosage and allow your body to acclimate so you can get some benefit from it, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, I rarely can take a whole scoop of like today's pre-workout. I don't take stimmed pre-workouts regardless. Like when my clients would know this, like when they ask me my opinion on pre-workouts and stuff, what I usually say is like you're better off getting a pump product and then controlling your own caffeine intake. And this is for people who have normal like reactions to caffeine, aren't super, desensitized to it, where like 500 milligrams like won't do anything for them, or yeah, same the other side where they are sensitive to it and 100 milligrams makes them go crazy or whatever, even though that's still like a good amount. But yeah, no, I'll just tell people like find a pump product. I'll send them over a bunch of my favorites from Aries Nutrition, and then be like, you can control your caffeine intake. So a few cups of coffee, maybe you go get a cold brew, maybe you enjoy making coffee at home. Maybe you just get some caffeine tablets and cut them in half, and that's what you do pre-workout. But yeah, I like to be able to control the amount of caffeine because I also know during the day I'm drinking coffee throughout the day up until 3. So I don't need to have 400 milligrams of caffeine in one sitting before I go train. It's not helpful for me.
Yeah, no, 100%. And again, I've definitely noticed a difference of being overstimulated versus being just the right amount of
For
stimulated.
sure.
Yeah, and again, it's not that it's not beneficial for me, it's that it's legitimately the opposite end of that spectrum where it's bringing my training session backwards as
Performance
opposed to
down.
forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's not helping me, especially when it comes to and again, maybe this is different for other people, but the biggest thing that I noticed there, honestly, and one thing that I'm always conscious of with my clients is obviously we want to make sure that clients are training as hard as they possibly can.
Yeah.
That's where I get fucked up. When I'm overstimulated and I've had too much caffeine, it's like I am so like almost I'm rushing it. You know what I mean? It's probably the best. I'm sped up. You know what I mean? It's probably
Yeah.
and I'm trying
I
to go.
personally go.
No, go ahead.
I personally feel like not, I don't want to say not safe, but I don't feel like as in control as I would have been if I didn't take the 350 milligrams of caffeine.
Yeah. So yeah. See, and for me, it's honestly not even the control, which I can understand that. Um, but I would say for me, it was more along the lines of my ability to be able to get that one more rep or that one more rep is legitimately the way that I would describe it. Like it was legitimately hard for me to get one more rep, push past failure or push to failure, just in the sense that again, I was like almost like rushing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then like, I can watch back those sets too, and I'm like, holy shit, like that didn't look like I was close to failure at all.
Do
And I
you
don't
do you also feel
know.
as though like you can't focus in the right way when you're overstimulated, like
Yes.
literally overstimulated? Because I feel that too.
Yeah, like I'm not focused. I am like I can go a million miles a minute, but I'm not like internally focused on one thing. Does
On
that
the
make sense?
rep and on
Yeah.
execution and yeah. And
Right.
what's
Like
coming next, so on and so
I'm
forth.
focused on like maybe I'm getting into the music that I'm listening to. I'm like focused on something other than what I should be focused on.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is
So
how I approach pre-workout products.
well, what I would say with pre-workout products specifically nowadays, if you want to partake in utilizing a pre-workout, like you got to get used to moderating the dosage. So when you
Yeah.
look at the back of these, it might be like, hey, this is a 14-gram scoop, and that 14-gram scoop is giving you 400 milligrams of caffeine, right? Well, maybe we're better off having 6 grams of that scoop. So you could still use right? The caffeine and get the a little bit of additional focus, get the ergogenic aid that we're going to get from taking caffeine there, the improvements in athletic performance, right? But at the end of the day, you're not going to be overstimulated from taking a full serving there just because
Yeah.
it's easier to grab a whole scoop, right? Let's see here. I'm actually looking for this study as I continue to talk because there was one that I saw recently and I want to see if I can pull it up to quote it directly. But They actually found that upwards of 400 milligrams of caffeine showed nothing but benefit in people pre-workout. So again, while our tolerance, right, might be that where we could benefit from 2 to 400 milligrams, or let's even say again, maybe 300 milligrams of caffeine for us. It doesn't mean that other people can't benefit from upwards of 400 milligrams. My only issue with this is this it actually. This might be it.
So they're saying 400 milligrams had nothing but improvements in performance.
Yeah,
But what kind of performance?
I think it was.
Like, is it cardiovascular? Is it like weight
Hold on,
training?
6 to 9.
Because hell yeah, I
No,
would.
so this particular, hold on, what is divided by 2.2? It's 96 times 2.2. So this particular study showed. So you ready for this? Not even 400. 540 milligrams of caffeine significantly improved cycling performance. Right.
Cycling?
And remember,
Oh,
yeah,
cycling. So
but
cardio.
well, no, we would consider cycling, and again, they don't necessarily performance cycling, right? So it's not necessarily like a marathon or length of time or whatever. They're probably looking at specifically things like revolutions per minute,
Revolution. Yeah,
right?
RPM.
Yeah, so you're talking about those some of these. If you look into cyclists, they are fucking yoked,
Oh
like
yeah.
their quads are humongous, like out of this world, bigger than bodybuilding quads, big, right? Like huge, some of them. But again, they found, for somebody that was 90 kilograms, what did I say? 580?
540.
540 milligrams of caffeine. So it was 4 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, significantly improved it. While the effects of low dose, which is 1 to 3 milligrams per kilogram of caffeine, were non-significant.
So how much, I can do kilograms. So how much would that be per pound?
Yeah.
Okay, kilograms 2.2. It's 2.2.
Yeah, kilograms are 2.2. But again, if we did somebody that was um 90 kilograms, I think is 200 pounds, if I'm not mistaken, right? So if you took somebody that was 90 and you gave them even that upper threshold, that's 270 milligrams of caffeine they found was non-significant. But here's the deal, though. Here's the deal. This is why you have to look into research a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's no like we would want like a 2 week washout period before that. So a lot of research that we look at, when we're testing something like this, what they'll do is they'll give people a 2 week washout or a 2 week whiteout period where they're not allowed to have any caffeine prior to doing a research like this. So these people could already have a very real tolerance, right,
Mhm.
to caffeine's impact. But I think what we can take from that paper, though, is that some people will benefit from higher amounts of caffeine. Now, again, I think on the other side of this is I wouldn't want myself, even though if I know I can benefit from taking up to 500 milligrams, right? Why am I going straight to that peak dosage, right? And why would I rely on that peak dosage every single training session? If I'm training 4 or 5 times a week, the reality is I don't want to have to take 500 milligrams of caffeine every single time I go to the gym, or 400 milligrams or whatever. There's some days where I might take 150 to 200 milligrams, right? Because I'm training arms and I just want to get in there and feel a little bit better. So boom, I'll take 200. Then maybe on a leg day, I would take a higher dosage, which again, for me and my sensitivity might be 350 milligrams. For somebody else, maybe it's that 500 milligram marker that they're going to be at prior to a leg day, right? But again, it's leg day. So they're training hard. They want it,
Yeah,
right?
it's relative.
But I would tell you to definitely augment your intake based on what your need is for that particular day. Maybe you're somebody that has a long shift at work. You're going into the gym after work. You need a little bit of a pick me up. So you want to have 300 milligrams of caffeine. Again, that's fine. But on the day that you're not at work and you're going to the gym, augment your dosage down to maybe just be a cup of coffee, a small cup of
Yeah.
coffee, right? And I'll tell you right now, that's what I do is I really do use coffee on an everyday basis now when it comes to my pre-workout. Like I have the from Aries, I got the non-stimulant Pandamus, just a pre-workout with like
Mhm.
pump and focus stuff. But it allows me to tap in mentally to focus a little bit more, and then I'll use my I'll make coffee. But I have a coffee maker that I can do a single cup or a pot, right? And what I'll do is I have a measuring, a teaspoon or whatever that I'll use for the pot and that I'll use for the cup. And what I do is I'll just use more if I want a higher dosage of caffeine. You know what I mean? It's as simple as that. So again, if you're at home and you're brewing yourself a regular cup, if you control the grinds, you're not using like a K cup or an espresso or something like that. Even an espresso, perfect example here. If you have something like an espresso, you can pick one shot of espresso. You can pick two shots of espresso. You can pick three shots of espresso. Fuck, you could take two shots of espresso and put in a 7-ounce cup of coffee from Nespresso. You know what I mean? Like you really can regulate your own caffeine. You regulate your caffeine take a little bit more efficiently when you're generating your own type of caffeine from coffee in that way. Or you mentioned caffeine pills, which are super cheap relative to pre-workouts too. You go online and grab a thing of caffeine pills and it'll last you, 2 months for probably like $20. You know what I mean? 2-3 months. And then obviously we're a big fan. So I guess that pretty much sums up caffeine, right? Where it's like, hey, don't what I would say about caffeine if I wanted to sum, don't abuse caffeine. If you feel like you need caffeine to go and get a good session in, if you feel like you need that level of caffeine, right? Where most of the research is going to suggest you, or I should say, where at least the research we looked at suggests that you could be to improve your athletic performance. If you feel like you need that, that's a problem. Right? That's a problem. Learn how to fucking train hard without needing to be stimmed out of your mind. Right. Therefore, now you have those stimulants to be able to add another notch above when the time comes that you need it. Right. And like save that for when you need it. Otherwise, I think anywhere between 1 and 300 milligrams of caffeine is fine as far as getting I think it could be good as far as getting a boost in performance for most people. And to feel a little bit better and more focused in their training sessions. But again, you got to be careful about what pre-workout you have because pre-workouts are jam-packed with more than just caffeine in terms of stimulants, right? So that's why, if we want to move on from caffeine now, I err on the side of these pre-workout products that don't have stimulants in there, right? So like I err on the side of like pump products, whatever you want to talk to them. Sometimes they're nootropic based, however you pronounce it. But at the end of the day, that's what I want. Something that's going to give me more focus. I want something that's going to give me more blood flow. I want to give something that's going to really set the stage for me to perform at a high level, both mentally and physically, right? And we can get that through these products. And then again, if we want to add caffeine on any given day, we can add our own based on how much we want to add. Now, the pre-workouts in terms of probably what they should contain more, what we really want to be focused on as far as our pre-workout products, ingredients are concerned is things like the nootropic specifically for me. So I want an Alpha-GPC, right? I want some sort of choline there. It's going to help be what is essentially brain food and give my brain something to kind of operate off of at that particular day, at that particular moment, especially when it's been a long day at work. I'm talking to people all day. I'm kind of fixated on other things as far as where my brain is concerned. If I want to lock in, I first need to give my brain the ability to do that, right? Or even if I want to take a stimulant like caffeine, right? I want to give my brain the opportunity to be able to keep up with where that stimulant is about to take me physically. That makes sense? Right. And Alpha-GPC is a great ingredient to be able to do that. So at minimum, I want Alpha-GPC anywhere from 300 all the way up to 600 milligrams nowadays you can find. And I think that that's a pretty solid dosage. It could be as little as oh no, this is 300 milligrams too. I was gonna say I even take it in pill form, but yeah, 300 to 600 milligrams I think is a good dosage for the Alpha-GPC, and I think that would be like a bare minimum for me when it comes to the nootropic blends. And then from there, I'm looking specifically at blood flow, right? I want to make sure that I'm getting enough blood flow, especially as it relates to if I am taking in caffeine. Remember, caffeine can have a little bit of a vasoconstrictive effect, right? So we really want to maximize that blood flow. And honestly, these are things too that you would just, again, logically speaking, would probably have a little bit more of an impact on things like our recovery, our ability to be able to grow, our ability to be able to have a little bit more endurance throughout our training sessions, take sets a little bit deeper, right? We're trying to drive more nutrients. Remember, your blood is where you're going to, is where you have a lot of we'll call them active nutrients for lack of better verbiage right now, right? Or it's where a lot of broken down nutrients might end up at the time of need is in the blood, right? We want to drive those to the muscles that we're working, right? You're already driving blood to the muscle. This is why you're getting a pump, quote unquote, in the muscle you're training, right? It's because you're engorging it with a lot of blood because again, your body's essentially turning on there and saying, hey, we're getting a lot of inflammation. We're breaking down this muscle tissue. We need to support it right now in terms of the recovery. So we're going to drive all this nutrient there by driving this blood there. We can extenuate that process, make that process more efficient,
And
Yeah,
more
drive
efficient.
efficiency.
Yeah. Efficient.
Yeah,
Yeah.
drive more efficiency with that product. If we take things that allow those blood vessels to relax, if we take things that allow that process to work better, is essentially what happens there. Some of the things that we look at there, citrulline malate, um, L-citrulline, L-citrulline malate. There's different types of one's better than the other. I think citrulline malate, if I'm not mistaken, is the one that you want. It might be L-citrulline.
I think it's
Do you
also.
know rather than citrulline malate?
Wait, no, maybe it is citrulline malate because L-citrulline, I don't know.
Yeah. Way to pick up the
Citrulline malate. I'm just
is
thinking.
it
Yeah.
uh yeah, I think it's citrulline malate, right?
Yeah.
Because it's bound to the salt that helps it as far as absorption is concerned. But anyway, bottom line is that's one that actually that's one that I think more than other ingredients you're going to see work pretty consistently, right? So it's like some of these other ingredients you might know, like somebody might say, oh, it gives me the best, and then you take it, you really don't get an effect. If you're taking the right dosage, right, of citrulline malate, or even L-citrulline, that's really going to be the difference between the two, right? Like you could go with either or, but you're going to need a lot more L-citrulline than you would citrulline malate, based on the absorption, if I'm remember correctly. Could be backwards on that. But it's definitely going to be something where when you're taking the right dosage, you are going to get a ridiculous pump from that. And again, the right dosage is going to be anywhere between 3 to 6 grams.
Maybe, sorry, I'm totally cutting you off because I'm picturing us backstage and you giving me L-citrulline, like straight before getting on stage. That was like literally when I was 5.
I think though it's citrulline malate is what
The
we want.
actual,
Which,
like,
again, either
whatever.
way works. So let's say if it's regular L-citrulline, I'd probably want somebody taking between 10 to 12 grams, where if it's citrulline malate, 3 to 6 grams is probably going to get the job done. But even 6 to 8 grams again, you're going to get a significant pump from that, right? There's no two ways around that. And again, you're going to get it through maximizing blood flow. So that's just one ingredient there. We do have a shit ton of ingredients to maximize blood flow. I'm sure if somebody was a little bit more into the pre-workout game, they could come in here and rattle off 100 of them.
And
But
what about
I just,
glycerol?
well, I was going to get to glycerol next. That's a little bit different. It's not really for blood flow.
Really?
Yeah, it's worked totally differently. But the bottom line though is the the ingredients pool there, right, is going to be wide, vast. And again, I have used some different ones. I couldn't even pronounce off the top of my head the one that I used most recently, nitrosagine or something like that. I was taking like fucking 3 grams of that a day.
Nitro what?
Um, I can't pronounce it. I'd have to send it to
Okay.
you. Somebody listening to this is going to know what I said and think I'm an idiot for saying it that way. But there's a whole bunch. There's also nitrates that tend to work very, very well. Anything that's attached to a nitrate. But then there are other ingredients that can still work to be able to generate a pump, like Marina was just talking about, but aren't based off of the blood flow. So glycerol works off of essentially pulling water into the cell and helping with cell volumization. So it's going to help again not only give you a pump and amplify the pump, but it's also going to help with that cell volumization, which is extremely important as it relates to recovery. It's
Yeah.
extremely important as it relates to muscle growth and muscle development over time. Glycerol, I think, and there's plenty of research on glycerol too, and its effects on improving athletic performance, right? So if that's something that we could utilize not just around the training session, right? Or look at it as a pre-workout or post-workout supplement, but look at it as something that is going to help maximize overall outcomes of the food that I'm ingesting, the supplements that I'm ingesting. Like, think about it, if we took glycerol, this is something a lot of guys will know. If I have them doing, if everything is 100% on point, we're looking really good going into peak week. Like, one thing that we did with Riley early on in the show was like, I would legitimately give him glycerol with meals. So we take a small amount of glycerol with meals to be able to maintain, like I said, that cellular volume, keep them a little bit more full, yada, yada, yada. So it could be a good tool in a lot of different ways. But again, I would even want somebody to visualize that as less of, hey, this is cool because in my pre-workout, and more of, hey, this is cool because it can help me maximize that pre-workout meal, can help me maximize the other supplements I'm taking around my session. It's still going to give me a good pump and add into that kind of pump category and pre-workout category. But again, it's also going to help me, maximize my post-workout meal,
Yeah.
right? All the different, maybe if somebody's taking drugs pre-workout because they're taking some Anavar, some Anadrol, something like that can help maximize that, et cetera, right? So bottom line is glycerol is a fun one for me. I like that one a lot. And I'm looking anywhere between, I honestly think 3 to 5 grams is where you're going to be best, but you'll see a lot of supplement companies go a little bit lower on the scale. I think like as low as 1.5 grams is what I've seen there. I would like no less than two, no less than 2 grams of glycerol, no less than two. And if I'm doing 2 grams, it's because I'm taking it multiple times throughout the course of the day. Um, but I think 3 to 5 should really be probably considered closer to the minimum. And then from there, I would say the only other thing that I think really yields some benefit, and again, this is going to come down to the concept of training to failure and really taking sets to completion is and progressions over time. Beta alanine, I think it's gotten a bad rap over a long period of time because of the fact that it causes that flushing sensation. Whenever you hear some asshole talk about niacin in the pre-workout, 90% of the time it's not niacin, it is beta alanine, and they just
Yep.
don't know it, right? Niacin causes a flush feeling like that very similarly, but it's just not part of most pre-workouts. Beta alanine is a very common piece in pre-workouts. And anywhere, I think from 1.6 to 3.2 grams has a good amount of clinical data on it, showing that it buffers lactic acid buildup. So again, it helps us get a little bit more endurance, helps us get a little bit deeper into sets, if you would, which could be very effective. But again, I like it at that higher dosage. And I think again, when we come back now full circle. So that would be the ingredients that I would really look for. And again, I'm narrowing it down to just picking one ingredient out of each one of these fields because there is, we're talking about beta alanine. There is betaine anhydrous that could help with athletic performance. There is, like I said, nitrated LRD nitrates that can help with blood flow. There is, other things that can help with cell volumization in large amounts. There's different things that you could use all throughout the field. But again, if I'm picking one ingredient from each of these, it would be the beta alanine. It would be the glycerol. It would be either Hydromax or even glycerol monostearate. It would be L-citrulline malate, and then Alpha-GPC, right? Like that, you could build your own really solid pre-workout product from. But those would be the ingredients I would look for in a high-quality pre-workout product. Now, that being said, the problem's going to be for most people, for bringing it back to what we originally started the conversation on, is making sure that you're able to get the amounts of each one of these ingredients we want while also not ODing on caffeine.
Overdoing the caffeine. Yep.
Yep. So that's why we recommend a pump product, right? Because it's usually going to have a pretty solid dosage of everything that we mentioned, and then add your caffeine on top, right? But I would also just warn people nowadays, again, with some of the ingredients that I've seen in the pump products, like you really do have to pick and choose here. It's not really as easy to be like, oh, let's grab a pump product, right? And like you get a pump product and it's got, whatever, 6 grams of L-citrulline in it. And like, that's it, right? It's not L-citrulline malate. There's nothing else in there. And maybe it does have 1.6 grams of beta alanine and like a gram of betaine anhydrous, and then like, whatever, 300 milligrams of alpha GPC and something else in there for focus, Bacopa or something like that,
What's
right?
your fave?
Like what's my fave what?
Pump.
Product?
Mm-hmm.
I like what's the one? Bloodshot is probably my favorite. Yeah. Bloodshot's probably my favorite in terms of the consistency, that you get from that. I'm trying to think of the other one off the top of my head, and I can't think of it. I had it before the pandemic, so now I can't remember at all. But I mean, Aries Nutrition has a lot of good pump products.
Good ones, yeah.
Okay? Like, yeah, you could obviously peruse through there. But again, you also want to be careful because there's some that are going to give you the minimal amount of minimal ingredients, and they're still charging 40, 50, 60 bucks because they have a cool label. Maybe they got, whatever, fucking 50,000 Instagram followers, so they feel like they can
someone's
do
face is on there, yeah.
Yeah, and for the most part, you're still going to get a pump. It's just you're not maximizing the value of any of these ingredients, But again, we talk nothing but pre-workout here in terms of product. I think it's also very important to understand that, like, I've talked about this with a couple clients recently too. One was like, hey, how come I'm not getting this pump? How come I'm not getting that pump? Oh, I got this pump when I did this. Remember, there are prerequisites involved to be able to get an adequate pump in the gym, or to be able to even honestly just feel good in the gym. We're sitting here
Yeah.
saying pump over and over and over again. If you want to feel good in the gym, you want to go in and have a high level performance, especially for our general population clients, like, you need to make sure that you are eating prior to the gym, right? And if you don't like going to the gym on a full stomach, that's fine, but you still want to eat something 90 minutes, 2 hours before the gym, right? That's me. I don't like going to the gym on a full stomach at all. So I will wait legitimately 90 minutes to 2 hours after my meal to be able to go to the gym, right? But along with my pre-workout, I also have an intra-workout, right? So I'm fueling myself. I'm not just going 4, 5, 6 hours without eating. I'm fueling myself to some degree too. I'll put a little bit of carbs in my pre-workout. I put a little bit of carbs in my intra-workout. And again, there is also clinical information on this too, in terms of caffeine and carbohydrates improving athletic performance more than caffeine or carbohydrates alone when you mix them together. There's actually more research on EAA's intra-workout with carbohydrates preventing muscle tissue breakdown than either one of those alone. Right. And we also have a podcast on this with Dr. Scott Stevenson, where you could learn more about that from a few years ago. But the bottom line is, I will utilize nutrition around my training session within those supplements that I'm taking. But you want to make sure, no matter what, that you're getting something in there, right? You want to get something in there. If you're the person that's training first thing in the morning, you're training on an empty stomach. Again, let's fix that by putting some carbohydrates, either pre-workout through a supplemental form or even intra-workout in a supplemental form. But most of us, if we're not training first thing in the morning and you have some time from when you wake up to the time you go to the gym, make sure you're making time to be able to have a good meal there, right? And remember, the biggest concern there is going to be carbohydrate. Do I want you to get some protein in to, again, support recovery more than anything else? Yeah, 100%. Recovery starts before the gym. Remember that,
Mhm.
right? I want you to get some amino acids in there. But at the end of the day, carbohydrates are going to be most important for athletic performance. So even if we err on the side of carbs and have a small amount of protein, I'd be okay with that. 1 scoop of protein powder, mix it up, get it down, and then get yourself a good amount of carbohydrates. Maybe from, you get 50 grams from having a bagel first thing in the morning. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
You can get a good amount from having some fruit there. So it's going to be one of those things where you're not going to get the highest level of performance from any supplements that you're taking unless you're fueled appropriately first and foremost, right? It allows that's what your pre-workouts are doing, is allowing those things to work most efficiently. And then from there, remember, sleep the night before is always going to be very important. I see this all the time with motherfuckers, and I have no idea why people are still resistant to understanding. Like, if you got let's say, 5 hours of sleep last night,
No
do not
business
wake up.
being in the gym.
Well, you have no business being in the gym 100%, but also don't think that you're going to have a good session.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care I know there's people out there that's like, no, I'm going to go get it done anyway. I'm going to do it. That's fine, dude. But don't sit here and tell me that you also had the highest level of performance that you could possibly have. That's not true. I don't care who you are. And I think a lot of younger people will be bullish in that thought process and think that that's not true, because they go in and they're still working, for all intents and purposes, hard, right? Like, they feel like they're working hard, and they are, based on what their capabilities are at that time. And they don't feel like they're working any less hard than when they have 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
But what happens is you grow the fuck up at a certain point, right? And you mature. And when you're like 32, 34, 36 years old and you're going to the gym with only 5 hours of sleep, you're like, oh, dude, I'm fucking struggling right now. Why am I struggling so hard? And it's easy to kind of trace that back to the reality. It's like, oh, shit, I only got 5 hours of sleep. So, but sleep is also important as it relates to not just your performance in the gym, but the way that your body's going to respond there too. So when I had a client recently who was telling me that they're just not getting a pump anymore during their training, and now we can go back and look at insulin sensitivity. We can go back and look at, how much food are they consuming and all these different things. Or, I mean, well, you said you were getting shitty sleep because you changed your shift at work, right? And like, yeah, I did. And then their shift went right back and they were perfectly fine the following week, had no issues. Excuse me, I just burped in everybody's
Mhm.
face. But sleep, I think, is an underrated. It's probably, it might even be overrated now, but overrated to an extent that I think it kind of falls by the wayside. It becomes white noise. Sleep
Mhm.
is a huge thing, right? Like, just
Yeah.
take the fucking day off, get your sleep that night, and then go to the gym that next day. You know what I mean? That's
Yep.
it. It's as simple as that. And then the last thing I'll talk about here is going to be water, sodium. and just proper hydration. There's actually a rule of three. Dan Gardner talks about it all the time, and I forget what it is. So I'm not going to try to quote it exactly because I'll sound like an idiot. But it's legitimately like if you're 1% dehydrated, it dramatically affects your athletic performance by like 30%, right? And again, this is all shown through clinical data. And if you're 2% less than optimally hydrated, it actually affects your heart rhythm and the way that your heart beats, right, when you're training. So literally, if it's affecting your heart rhythm and your heartbeat, it's affecting the rate that you can pump blood, right? And then if you're like 3%, and again, I don't know this I might be off here to some extent. And if you're off by 3%, it actually affects your sleep at night. Right. If you're 3% less than optimally hydrated, it affects your sleep at night, which ultimately has been shown to affect your athletic performance. So, like staying optimally hydrated, like we all think about it as this thing where it's like, oh, yeah, we got to be hydrated. Like it has very real consequences on the way that your body operates when you're less than
Yeah.
hydrated. Right. And remember, hydration is not just water, it's also the amount of salt, the amount of electrolytes that we have in general. But sodiums are going to be a key player there because there's a certain gradient or a certain ratio, right, in the blood of sodium to water. And when that gets thrown off, that's where the body starts to go into a mode of, oh, I need to hold on to this. I need to hold on
Yeah.
to that. I need to let go of it, right? So we want to try to keep those things relatively consistent. But I would even say, hey, if you're the type where you're waking up first thing in the morning, it's a perfect example, right? Because this happens to me sometimes. I'm waking up first thing in the morning. I want to go to the gym, but I'm not going to have a meal. I'm going to have a scoop of protein powder and a bagel, like I just mentioned before. That's a solid, whatever, 30 grams of protein, 50 grams of carbs. I'm ready to go out the door, easy to digest. Well, where the hell did I get all my sodium from? There'll
Yeah.
be a little bit of sodium in the bagel. There'll be a little bit of sodium in the whey protein naturally. But what you should be doing there is either putting an extra little bit of sodium, like 500 milligrams or a gram of salt on your tongue or in your pre-workout, which I know everybody's like, oh, it tastes like shit. Shut up, suck it up, get it down. And I guarantee you that in and of itself will make a world of difference in your performance. These
Yeah.
are some things that I think people are adverse to doing sometimes, whether it's taking the day off because of sleeping, adding sodium to your drink, yada. Because again, we're talking to a lot of lifestyle people right now, right? Like this is for our clients, right? I'm talking to you guys, I'm talking to the lifestyle clients. I know that might be like, oh, well, Marina only puts that salt on her tongue like that because she's a bikini. If you want to feel good and have good training sessions, right, that directly relates back into the way that your process, how effectively your process is working, right? I can't make you train harder, right? I can't make you feel
Mhm.
good when you're training. I can't make you train more efficiently, right? Like I can't, if you're there, you're taking accountability of these little things and you go in and you have the best training sessions ever over and over and over again, that's going directly correlate positively to your outcomes as far as your results are concerned. Obviously, to me, I tell people all this. There's no, people talk all the time about like abs are made in the kitchen and yada yada. It's 100% training, 100% nutrition. It's not 50% this, 80% that, 20% this, 30% here. It's 100%, 100%. If you want your body to look like that goal physique that you have of having nice toned arms or a chiseled midsection or a bigger chest in your t-shirt, you got to go in and you got to put in the effort. And doing some of these things is kind of as out of your realm as it might seem to look up L-citrulline malate or to start taking a pre-workout or to start taking something for better focus around the gym, or even if you're somebody that doesn't do much caffeine and you're afraid to have 50, 100 milligrams of caffeine to try to get more. The bottom line is doing these things that you haven't done are going to most certainly improve your athletic performance in the gym, guaranteed.
Yep. Damn, you killed that. Yeah, I didn't think that we would go this deep into everything, but I enjoyed it. Anything else you want to add?
Nah, I think that's it for me. I think I got it in there pretty good, and I touched on everything that we want to touch on. I would say if anybody has any questions, because I got a couple people from our last podcast, and it was a couple of good conversations I had off our last podcast. If anybody has any questions, feel free to hit us up. Right.
Hmm.
And I would always be more than happy to do a follow-up episode on this where we can legitimately go back and call us pre-workout, episode number one, and then we could have a follow-up episode, pre-workout episode number two, to
Yeah.
go more in detail with anything that you guys want, because I literally just touch on these things
Yeah,
individually. I didn't give any background information necessarily. So by
for
all means,
sure.
ask away.
I would enjoy that too, because I usually just take my blood shot and call it a day. But yeah, alrighty. Like Tim said, reach out if you have any questions, comments, concerns, if you want to chit chat. But besides that, thank you all for listening, and we will be see you next week. Next week is Christmas, so no, enjoy your Christmas. Happy New Year. Bye.